blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And good morning. Your Niagara Frontier radio reading service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, April 13th. Your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki. And as I look at the forecast for this week, I'm reminded of Sesame Street, and they'd have the day represented by a letter. And I think the weather forecast is the letter W. It will be warm, wet, windy, wild, wacky weather week. That's
Don't you
what
love
it is.
Buffalo?
That's Buffalo, yeah. So today it'll be windy with rain this morning, then a shower or two, a high of 63. A thunderstorm in parts of the area will happen tonight. The low will be 55. There'll be a couple of showers and a thunderstorm tomorrow with a high of 70. And Wednesday, again, a couple of showers with a high of 69. The normal high and low is 53 and 35, and the record high was 80 degrees in 2001. The record low was 20 in 1874. Wow. And the national highs yesterday, was in Quincy, Florida, was 88, and the low was in Saranac Lake, New York, of 17 degrees. So that's what we have to look forward to this week.
Well, I'm happy for the rain. I overseeded my lawn over the weekend, so I'll take all the rain I can get. Turning to the front page of today's Buffalo News, our lead story is Assigned Counsel Program undergoes some big changes. Payments paused or slowed amid revamp of leadership. The Erie County Assigned Counsel Program, which assigns private practice lawyers to represent criminal defendants who can't afford their own lawyer, has a new board and a stricter invoice vetting procedure that will slow payments to participating attorneys. Meanwhile, the board continues to withhold payments and case assignments to certain lawyers as it searches for a forensic auditor to look into the billing patterns of specific people. Daniel J. Henry, Jr., the new president of the board, said payments have been suspended for 5 lawyers in light of the Erie County Comptroller's Office analysis of the Assigned Counsel Program. There's been a pause for assignments and for payment for a number of individuals, he said, and then they'll be reviewed again once the forensic audit is completed. What their findings are would lead us in the next direction. The adjustments are in response to an Erie County Comptroller's Office report last month that raised questions about potential overbilling, improper payments, and lax administrative oversight of the program. The office also privately shared additional information beyond the public report with the Assigned Counsel Program regarding billing irregularities and recommended that program leaders begin an immediate review of certain lawyers' payments. County Executive Mark Poloncarz said Tuesday that he is not satisfied with the current board makeup and wants to see more county appointees and people who are not lawyers on it. This is too important an organization that receives too much funds from the county in New York State to basically act as if it's a private entity that can do what it pleases, Poloncarz said. The Assigned Counsel Program has 12 board members, including at least 8 who have not served on the program board in the past, Henry said. None of the lawyers on the board receive any case assignments through the program, he said. That includes Henry, the board president, Vice President Kevin Kearney, Treasurer Barry Covert, and Secretary Aaron McCampbell Paris. The board has issued a request for proposals in order to select and hire a forensic auditing firm to review the Comptroller's Office findings and determine whether any billing practices may have been fraudulent. Henry said he was not yet aware of the timetable for hiring an outside auditor or when such an audit might be complete. Meanwhile, administrators with the Assigned Counsel Program sent an email last week to its participating lawyers responding to concerns raised about the smaller-than-usual payments issued recently for vouchers that lawyers have submitted for their work. The turnaround for voucher payments is being extended from 30 days to up to 60 days. While our staff will engage in an efficient and deliberative process and devote a high percentage of administrative staff capacity to voucher review, we cannot sacrifice fulsome review for expedience, said First Deputy Defender Kevin Stadelmeyer. Accurate and thorough review takes time. They also noted that judges in the 8th Judicial District will again begin reviewing voucher submissions after rescinding COVID-19 era provisions that waived judicial review of invoices for the past 6 years. Obviously, these measures combined may result in slowing of both processing and payment of your vouchers, Stadelmeyer said. We're hopeful with your cooperation in submitting vouchers timely that any negative impacts will be temporary. Please understand that we are cognizant of the difficulties this may cause and will work diligently to mitigate the negative impacts wherever we can. James Maloney, one of 5 lawyers who's had his pay suspended, said all of the affected lawyers he has been in touch with have been given no reason or explanation for why their pay has been withheld or what requires further investigation. We're all punching in the dark here, he said. Maloney is among a small subset of assigned counsel program lawyers who take on some of the most serious and violent felony cases. He said that while certain lawyers have a reputation for what he called some billing creativity, he is not one of them. Even though, he said, he expects it will be a month before a forensic auditor is hired, months more before the audit is completed, and even longer until all the dust settles. Meanwhile, he said, he and his colleagues are grappling with filing tax returns for 2025 and are struggling with how to complete them in a way that will avoid fines and penalties. Maloney and others continue to carry and bill for dozens of pre-existing assigned counsel program cases, but are not being given any new cases or being paid for vouchers they submitted for other cases. In addition, stipends Maloney said he would receive for being stationed at specific town courts as attorney of the day, handling initial arraignments, and an attorney on call for representing defendant arraignments in court after hours, have also come to an end since he and other affected lawyers have been temporarily stripped of those responsibilities. Affected lawyers who said they were being paid to serve mentors have lost that income as well.
Also on today's front page, tax proposed on nicotine pouches gets pushback. Pushing an affordability agenda in this election year, Governor Kathy Hochul has repeatedly opposed proposals to increase taxes, including New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's call to increase personal income taxes on the state's top earners. But she has made some exceptions, including a proposal in her $263 billion budget to impose a 75% wholesale tax on alternative nicotine products under the argument that it will safeguard the health of youth. It's an argument attracting opposition from the makers of the nicotine pouch ZYN, as well as lawmakers and business representatives in Western New York. This proposal is deeply flawed, stated a March 23rd letter to Hochul from a coalition of 24 groups from across the state, including the Business Council of New York State, the Buffalo Niagara Partnership, and Niagara USA Chamber. Its consequences would undermine public health, worsen inequities, expand illicit markets, and directly conflict with the goals the governor and legislature are trying to achieve. The coalition suggested that if the state taxes nicotine pouches, it should adopt a unit-based tax as opposed to the wholesale tax it called volatile. A unit-based tax creates stable, transparent pricing, prevents deep discounting, and is far more effective at blocking youth access the coalition stated. Wholesale taxes do the opposite. They fuel illicit trade, counterfeits, and smuggling, creating unregulated channels that youth can easily access and expose the public to unsafe products with no age checks or oversight. If the state genuinely seeks to keep nicotine pouches out of the hands of children, it must use the tax method that actually works, not one that makes the problem worse. Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie from the Bronx and Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart from Yonkers introduced one House budget plan last month that included Hochul's plans to tax alternative nicotine products. But some Western New York lawmakers, including the region's most powerful legislator, were willing to entertain the coalition's succession. Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes from Buffalo, who announced earlier last week that she would not seek re-election, is open to the per unit tax as well as other revenue raisers to ensure the state has adequate revenue, said Thomas O'Neill White, a spokesperson for Peoples-Stokes. Senator Patrick Gallivan from Elma, the ranking Republican on the Senate Health Committee, is opposed to any new tax, including the proposal for nicotine pouches and other nicotine products, said his spokesperson, James Rainey. Senator George Borrello from Sunset Bay argued that a 75% wholesale tax would mostly hurt the same lower-income working-class New Yorkers that Hochul says her affordability agenda is intended to help, while increasing costs on consumers seeking alternatives to cigarettes. And practically speaking, for a district like mine that borders Native American territories and Pennsylvania, a steep price hike won't reduce consumption so much as redirect it, draining sales from local convenience stores and small businesses with nothing to show for it, Borrello said. This tax should not be included in the final budget. On Saturday, Hochul spokesperson Jonah Alon said the governor was standing up to big tobacco to help protect our kids and safeguard public health. Time and again, these companies have shown that they are willing to put profit over the well-being of New Yorkers, especially our younger populations, he said. The governor's proposal is a common-sense measure to help safeguard New Yorkers across the state, improve public health at large, push back against manipulative tactics by tobacco companies, and increase necessary protections against dangerous products. In her State of the State address in January, Hochul argued that by applying a tax on non-tobacco products that, quote, still deliver large hits of nicotine, end quote, the state would be able to fund $50 million annually toward healthcare initiatives. Her budget, introduced a week later, included legislation to tax largely unregulated nicotine products into the state's tax administration and enforcement mechanisms. Hochul's budget proposal would impose a 55-cent per unit distributor tax on vape products, such as e-cigarettes, and would create a registry of vape products. Flavored vape products are illegal in the state. Combined, these overdue reforms will help safeguard youth and young adults across the state, improve health at large, and push back against Big Tobacco's latest attempt to profit at your family's expense, Hochul's State of the State said. In a statement, the State Department of Health said it is committed to protecting New Yorkers of all ages from highly addictive nicotine products and pushing back at the tactics used by tobacco companies. The future of Hochul's proposed tax on alternative nicotine products will be decided when Hochul and lawmakers agree on a final state budget, which was due by April 1st. The public, according to a Siena University poll, is on board with this tax. A sampling of 804 registered voters conducted on behalf of the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids showed that voters supported the tax on nicotine pouches 64% to 25%, with 68% to 24% saying they were concerned about the increasing use by young people of products such as Zyn.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 15 minutes past the hour. Time now to turn to the editorial page, excuse me, where the headline is Timely Reminder. An audit of Western Regional off-track betting indicates that vigilance is still necessary. State Comptroller Thomas DiNapoli administered a healthy dose of well-deserved criticism to former Western Regional off-track betting leaders. Although no leadership has been in place for the past year and a half, it is worth reviewing what went wrong. After all, past mistakes can turn into teachable moments for the current guard, headed by former Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown, who became president and CEO following the Board of Directors vote in September of 2024. Brown has initiated several reforms at the OTB, resulting in more money being distributed than ever to its member municipalities last year. Brown and Dennis Bassett, the chair of its Board of Directors, noted, and despite revenue declines from some of its operations. As reported by the News' Stephen T. Watson, the Western Regional off-track betting operates the Batavia Downs Hotel, video gaming casino floor, and live harness horse racing, as well as off-site betting parlors. Its board has representatives from the cities of Buffalo and Rochester and each of the 15 counties in the region. Those municipalities receive a share of OTB revenues. But as the state comptroller's audit found, past practice by the Western Regional off-track betting failed in several categories, chief among them transparency. Also, the audit found there wasn't enough done to keep agency spending in check, and a failure to respond to concerning trends in horse racing and gaming industries. The Comptroller's Office correctly takes issue with Brown's predecessor, Henry Wojtasek, an influential area Republican. Wojtasek, who served as president and CEO since 2016, announced he would step down at the end of 2024. He was criticized for patronage hiring and spending on perks for insiders. A pair of earlier audits from the Comptroller's Office, released in 2021, highlighted the point. One audit from that year found that Western Regional off-track betting spent $121,000 on tickets for the Bills, Sabres, and Rochester Americans, in addition to concerts, food, and alcohol for board members and other employees without state oversight. A second audit found that Wojtasek did not promptly reimburse the agency $3,484 for his personal use of an official vehicle. DiNapoli's comment at the time that the Western Regional off-track betting, quote, needs to clean up its operations, was spot on. It took too much time, roughly 3 years, before Wojtasek was sent packing, though far from empty-handed. Democrats, watchdog groups, and this page took issue with what looked like a lot of golden parachutes of more than $500,000 in combined severance payments that Wojtasek and 2 other senior agency leaders received. The call to audit the severance payments was to no avail. The State Comptroller's Office said its review would cover the OTB's overall finances. Incredibly, Wojtasek lingers. The Republican-led Niagara County legislature voted 10-5 last year to appoint Wojtasek as the county's representative on the 17-member board. Undoubtedly, his standing as the former chairman of the Niagara County Republican Party helped his cause. He is currently filling the remaining 2 years of the term of Elliot Winter, who represented the county on the OTB board for 9 years before announcing his resignation in late August. Wojtaszek defended OTB operations during his tenure, mentioning, quote, explosive growth realized at Batavia Downs and Western Regional off-track betting from 2021 to 2024, close quote. It's a curious boast, given what the State Comptroller's Office audit reveals. Brown may be steering the agency in a better direction, but sustained success will require the entire organization, especially its board, to match that commitment.
Next, we have another voice, and today's topic is on energy, and the letter is submitted by Mark Brown, who is the Vice President of State Affairs for the Consumer Energy Alliance. The headline is, "Do not repeat Connecticut's policy mistakes." Lawmakers in Albany are searching for ways to address one of the most pressing concerns facing New Yorkers, rising energy costs. As policymakers weigh new onerous regulatory proposals affecting utilities and the rate-setting process, New York should pause and consider a cautionary example close to home. Just across the border, Connecticut pursued increasingly aggressive policies aimed at the state's utilities, which has created years of regulatory uncertainty for energy companies and other companies seeking to do business there. Only now is Connecticut starting to recover, and its road is long. It's understandable that the New York Assembly and Senate are concerned with high energy prices and want to take steps to provide relief to customers. However, the current budget proposal from the Assembly and Senate would have a chilling impact on energy investment and jobs in the Empire State without getting to the real cause of price increases. Among the most concerning provisions in the budget proposal is a retroactive and 2-year moratorium on major utility rate increases while the state studies energy affordability. Although a rate freeze may appear to offer short-term relief, it introduces uncertainty into a system that depends on stability and predictability. Retroactively freezing rates when a rate case has been litigated before and approved by the state's Public Service Commission will hurt utilities' ability to make necessary investments in grid to ensure consumers have access to reliable energy. That may be the point, as it was in Connecticut. Scapegoat utilities and cut their rates of return as a prelude to plans to have the state take over these companies. Governor Kathy Hochul recently rejected the idea of a rate freeze and said she preferred embracing an all-of-the-above approach to get more sources of energy for New Yorkers. This is a recognition of the realities of the state's energy situation. The lesson from Connecticut should be clear. When policymakers create uncertainty around utilities, capital flows elsewhere, investment slows, and the reliability of the energy system suffers. Connecticut already ran this experiment. New York should learn from the results, not repeat them.
Well, next we'll turn to today's editorial cartoon, and it comes from John Deering, who writes for the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. And it's a one-panel cartoon, and we see a woman holding a tablet sitting on her couch. She's got her dog next to her and one of her kids with a doll at her feet, and kind of in the background is her husband working on his computer. And she's sitting in front of the TV, and on the TV is Melania Trump. And she is making the statement that made the news during the past week about her not having any involvement in the Jeffrey Epstein shenanigans, I'll say it, going on in Washington. Next to Melania on the TV is a little side sign and a picture of her book, and it says, "Buy my book." But the woman is saying, the war to distract us from Epstein is going so badly now, they're using Epstein to try and distract us from the war. So we describe, and you can decide what that means. Back to you, Ted.
Okay, and we turn now to the national opinion pieces, and our first one comes to us from Erwin Chemerinsky. The headline is, "Simply holding ICE agents accountable isn't nearly enough." Senate Democrats are absolutely right in doing everything they can, including holding up funding for the Department of Homeland Security to impose limits on behavior by U.S. immigration and custom enforcement agencies. But it's not enough. There also must be congressional action to address the inhumane conditions in ICE detention centers and the lack of protections for those facing deportation. Unfortunately, the current law is grossly inadequate, and many people will suffer as a result. Since October, 23 people have died in ICE custody, already surpassing the total for the prior fiscal year and now on pace to be the deadliest period in 2 decades. Detainees in ICE facilities report worms in their food, unsafe drinking water, overflowing sewage, and weeks without medical attention. Under the Trump administration, ICE has dramatically increased its use of solitary confinement as a punishment, isolating more than 10,500 people between April 2024 and May 2025 alone. If prisoners were treated this way in federal or state facilities, it would be acknowledged as cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the Eighth Amendment. But those in immigration detention cannot invoke this constitutional protection because of the Supreme Court's 1893 decision in Fong Tu Ting versus the United States, where the court held that deportation is a civil, not criminal proceeding, and therefore is not punitive. As a result, the cruel and unusual punishment clause is not deemed to apply at all. Indeed, because deportation is not considered a criminal matter, the constitutional provisions protecting those accused and convicted of crimes do not apply, including prohibiting unreasonable searches and seizures, providing a lawyer, and requiring a jury trial. In INS versus Mendoza Lopez in 1984, the court declared that, quote, consistent with the civil nature of the proceeding, various protections that apply in the context of a criminal trial do not apply in a deportation hearing. Quite importantly, unlike criminal defendants, immigration detainees have no right to appointed counsel for their deportation proceedings. They must find and fund their own representation, a nearly impossible task for someone being held in a remote detention facility, often far from their home community and sometimes without access to a telephone. The consequences are stark and well documented. The Vera Institute of Justice has found that detained immigrants without legal representation are deported at dramatically higher rates than those with counsel, even when their underlying legal claims are comparatively strong. The Institute has also documented that more than 550,000 people who were ordered removed in immigration court over the past 12 months, 69% lacked legal representation as the most recent available data. Those who are subjected to inhumane treatment by ICE agents rarely have any remedy. Even if the victims can somehow obtain a lawyer, there is no federal statute that authorizes suits against federal officers who violate the Constitution. A law adopted in 1871 allows suits against state and local officials and local governments, but no similar statute exists that authorizes claims against federal officials. And in the last 45 years, the Supreme Court has made it much harder to sue federal officers directly under the Constitution for their illegal conduct. Beyond this, the Trump administration has summarily deported individuals to El Salvador, where the Constitution doesn't apply at all. For example, more than 280 Venezuelan migrants were sent to El Salvador's notorious CICOT prison, where routine torture has been documented in defiance of a federal court order. A CBS News investigation discovered that 3/4 of those migrants had no apparent criminal record, and a federal judge found the men have been spirited away before any legal challenge could be mounted. The Trump administration has taken the position that once they are in El Salvador, no court has jurisdiction to protect them. All of this should be unacceptable in a country that believes in the rule of law and that should be obligated to treat every person humanely. Congress can fix all of this if it has the will to do so. In February 2025, Senator Alex Padilla of California introduced an Access to Counsel Act, which would guarantee the right to consult with an attorney for individuals detained at ports of entry. In November, the Restoring Access to Detainees Act, which would extend similar protections to individuals held in the Department of Homeland Security custody, was introduced by Senators Padilla, Murphy, and Schiff in California. Then in December, Senators Padilla and Richard Blumenthal introduced an Accountability for Federal Law Enforcement Act, which would create a statutory cause of action following any individual, regardless of citizenship, to sue federal law enforcement officers and agencies in a civil court for constitutional violations. This is a vital change in the law to protect their basic constitutional rights. Those bills and the proposed restrictions on the conduct of ICE agents should be just the beginning of ensuring that the Constitution applies to the actions of these federal officials. They are crucial as the Trump administration is building vast warehouses across the country to house those who are apprehended by ICE. I would never have imagined that in my country we would have masked agents apprehending people, taking them into custody where they are held in inhumane conditions and where they face deportation without representation and often without any meaningful due process. Our country can and must do better.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 33 minutes past the hour. Next, we have a column by Kathleen Parker, who writes for the Washington Post, and her headline is, What Trump Can Truly Learn from America's Cosmic Voyagers. Most people who fire off profane or embarrassing messages do it after a long night of boozing and wake up full of regret. Not President Trump, who doesn't even drink. Perfectly sober, he was comfortable dropping the F-bomb on Easter morning and calling his adversaries bastards while Christians around the world celebrated their holiest day. May we now retire the fiction that Trump was chosen by God to lead the nation. Trump didn't even place his hand on the Bible when he was sworn in as president for the second time. Compare his behavior with the exalted comments from the 4 Artemis II astronauts whose perspectives are on a higher plane than those of the man who once bragged of grabbing women beneath the waist. Whether a function of Taco Tuesday, Trump always chickens out, or of real negotiations, the United States did not flatten Iran nor destroy all its bridges and grids as the president had threatened. A 2-week ceasefire was mutually acceptable, Trump announced just before his 8 p.m. Tuesday deadline for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz, while the two nations seek a meeting of the minds. On the same day, Trump was threatening to commit war crimes and destroy Iran's civilian infrastructure. America's cosmic voyagers were journeying far from Earth as they, too, celebrated not just their mission to fly near the moon, but the cornerstone of Christianity, the resurrection of Jesus. The juxtaposition of these starkly different worldviews was both instructive and edifying, if flickeringly. The astronauts traveled to the far side of the moon, while Trump traveled to the dark depths of his own soul. He threatened not only destruction of a civilian suffering on a grand scale, to wipe out the whole civilization. There is no greater evil. What did he think might happen after he destroyed an ancient civilization, indeed one of the greatest in human history? A standing ovation at The Hague, a Nobel Peace Prize, control of the planet, perhaps the last one, but surely no other. Before takeoff, when a reporter asked the crew what they thought about flying by the moon during Easter, Commander Reed Wiseman nodded to the wider world. We have our own different opinions and our own individual beliefs, he said, gesturing to his fellow astronauts. As we've said from the beginning, we really are for all, by all, and we want to take the whole world along with us. One needn't hitch a rocket ride to know these things. They're self-evident. Equally so is that Trump is a danger to the world and should be stopped by any legal means. A little space travel might be in order, Mr. Musk. Trump might benefit from the overview effect to better align his self-image with reality.
Our next headline is, War again shows that Trump cannot admit he has been defeated. In the January 2004 pilot of The Apprentice, Donald Trump said something he would never admit now. It wasn't always so easy, he said in a voiceover, noting that by the late 1980s, I was seriously in trouble and billions of dollars in debt. It was one of the few times Trump has ever publicly acknowledged failure. Even then, he was reading a script meant to promote an against the odds credentials for reviewers, previewing the combative charisma that propelled a political career a decade later. In his telling now, Trump never loses. Even when he clearly has been defeated, as he was in the 2020 election, Trump declares victory, so often that his supporters actually believe him. He knows the power of repetition. The world for him is divided into winners and losers, and he's always a winner, said John Bolton, who was one of Trump's national security advisors during his first term. The Supreme Court strikes down his signature tariffs. Trump vows to work around the court, ensuring import taxes can be used in a much more powerful and obnoxious way. His Justice Department stops appealing court rulings blocking executive orders aimed at punishing big law firms, then reverses course and renews those legal fights after coverage of a non-appeal looks like an admission of defeat. One of the president's sons, Eric, said his father, quote, has never needed to project a winning image. He is the definition of a winner based on what he has built and accomplished, end quote. But for the Republican president, the stakes for winning have never been greater than the war with Iran, where he declared victory within days. He has repeated that assertion constantly, even as Tehran continued to strike U.S. and allied targets and choke off the Strait of Hormuz, spreading economic pain around the globe. With a ceasefire in place, Trump is saying the United States has accomplished its goals, but reality does not substantiate that. Whether or not things are going well, that's not going to detour him from declaring victory. That's baked into the cake, Bolton said.
Well, next we'll go back to the front page of today's Buffalo News for our next story, and it is the Sabres rebuild wasn't limited to on-ice play. Gwelly and his team laid the foundation for the return of fans and the playoffs. Pete Gwelly realizes it has been a long and grueling 14 years for the playoff-starved fan base of the Buffalo Sabres. But for the president of the team's business operations, the Sabres Reclamation Project, that included a major push to change the team's business structure to help get fans back into the seats, improve the game experience, and create excitement again for hockey, has been only 2 seasons in the making. Gwelly started as Chief Operating Officer for the Sabres and Buffalo Bills in April of 2024, so the long-awaited turnaround on the Sabres they're experiencing this season has happened somewhat quickly and ahead of schedule from his perspective. He knew from the start that things didn't need to just change on the ice, but also behind the scenes. There was 13 difficult years before I got here, but inside the organization we had to look at 2 years ago as day one, Gwelly said, and I couldn't do anything about those previous 13 years, but I could focus on what we could do moving forward. Winning helps. Attendance has surged since the Sabres started their current hot streak in December, just before the firing of General Manager Kevyn Adams and Jarmo Kekalainen taking over. It also helped the team rebuild the season ticket base that had shrunk markedly during the NHL record playoff drought. Heading into play on Sunday, Buffalo's 106 points leads a pack of 3 teams vying for first place in the division. All that success on the ice has helped supercharge the efforts by the Sabres leadership to bring fans back into the arena, but was also important to be ready for their return. The Sabres have sold out 17 straight home games and are again in the top half of the NHL in total attendance after languishing toward the bottom of the league. We were determined to put a strategy in place to get this right, and you can't necessarily determine the timing, but I was confident in that strategy, the level of execution, and the commitment of ownership, said Gwelly, who previously spent 10 years with the Bills and, as COO of the NBA's Charlotte Hornets, helping to revitalize the franchise's business before working with the NFL New York Giants. We're certainly not done and know we have more work to do, but it's exciting to see how far we've come, he said.
In world news, voters oust Trump ally Orban. Hungarian voters ousted long-serving Prime Minister Viktor Orban yesterday after 16 years in power, rejecting the authoritarian policies and global far-right movement that he embodied in favor of a pro-European challenger in a bombshell election result with global repercussions. It was a stunning blow for Orban, a close ally of both U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, who quickly conceded defeat after what he called a painful election result. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance visited Hungary just days before the election, trying to help push Orban over the finish line. Election victor Peter Magyar, a former Orban loyalist who campaigned against corruption and on everyday issues like health care and public transportation, pledged to rebuild Hungary's relationships with the European Union and NATO, ties that frayed under Orban. European leaders quickly congratulated Magyar. His victory was expected to transform political dynamics within the EU, where Orban upended the bloc by frequently vetoing key decisions, prompting concerns that he sought to break up from the inside. It will also reverberate among far-right movements around the world, which viewed Orban as a beacon for how nationalist populism can be used to wage culture wars and leverage state power to undermine opponents.
Staying with world news now, the United States has announced a blockade of the key Iranian Strait of Hormuz. President Trump on Sunday said the U.S. Navy would immediately begin a blockade of ships entering or leaving the Strait of Hormuz after U.S.-Iran ceasefire talks in Pakistan ended without an agreement. The U.S. Central Command announced that it will blockade all Iranian ports beginning at 10 a.m. today, about 15 minutes from now. CENTCOM said the blockade will be, quote, enforced impartially against vessels of all nations. It said it would still allow ships traveling between non-Iranian ports to transit the strait. Trump wants to weaken Iran's key leverage in the war after demanding that it reopen the strait to all global traffic on the waterway that was responsible for 20% of global oil shipping before fighting began. Traffic in the strait has been limited even in the days since the ceasefire. Marine trackers say over 40 commercial ships have crossed since the start of the ceasefire. A U.S. blockade could further rattle global energy markets. It's going to be all or none, and that's the way it is, Trump told Fox News. Trump said on social media that he told the Navy to, quote, seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas, end quote. He said other nations would be involved, but did not name them. Freedom of navigation, of peaceful navigation, is a basic principle of international maritime trade. Iran's Revolutionary Guard later said the Strait of Hormuz remained under Iran's, quote, full control, unquote, and was open for non-military vessels, but military ones would get, quote, a forceful response, unquote, two semi-official Iranian news agencies reported. During the 21-hour talks, the U.S. military said 2 destroyers had transited the strait ahead of mine-clearing work, a first since the war began. Iran denied it. Trump's plan to use the Navy to block the strait is unrealistic, and he will have to concede on some issues with Iran, said Andreas Krieg, a senior lecturer in security studies at King's College in London. There isn't any tool in the toolbox in terms of the military lever that he could use to get his way, Krieg said. Trump said Tehran's nuclear ambitions were at the core of the talks' failure. In comments to Fox News, he again threatened to strike civilian infrastructure. Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf, who led Iran's side, addressed Trump in a new statement on his return to Iran. He said, if you fight, we will fight. The face-to-face talks that ended early Sunday were the highest-level negotiations between the longtime rivals since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Neither indicated what will happen after the ceasefire expires on April 22nd. We need to see an affirmative commitment that they will not seek a nuclear weapon, said Vice President Vance, leading the U.S. side.
As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need any further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. Again, that's 716-821-5555. And we have one death listing today. Domzalski Kenneth J., who is 54, passed away on March 30th, 2026, after a brief illness. We also have 3 obituaries of note. Former Representative Eliot Engel, who was a fixture in New York politics for decades until he lost his seat in the House in 2020, has died at the age of 79. And Phil Garner, a 3-time All-Star infielder who went on to manage the Houston Astros to their first World Series appearance, has died. He was 76. And finally, Asha Bhosle, one of India's most versatile Bollywood singers, whose performances shaped the country's musical memory and modern cinema, has died. She was 92. If you need any further information on any of these names, please call us at 821-5555. Again, 716-821-5555.
Well, now it's time to turn to Georgia Nichols Royal Stars, and if today is your birthday, happy birthday. You are intellectual, realistic, and strong-willed. You are a private person who is curious, methodical, and progressive. Take an inventory of your life this year. Now, the stars show the kind of day that you're going to have. 5 stars is a dynamic day, 4 stars is positive, 3 is average, 2 is so-so, and 1 star is a difficult day. Fortunately, we don't have any 1 or 2 star days today. For Aries, it's going to be a 3-star day. Today, your ruler, fiery Mars, is lined up with fuzzy Neptune, which could make you feel irritable or discouraged. Tonight, you should enjoy privacy. For us Taurians, our day is a 3-star day, and today's a mixed bag. It's an excellent day to shop for wardrobe goodies for yourself. However, don't go overboard because of feelings of inadequacy or a desire to overcompensate. Tonight, we should be friendly. For Gemini, a 4-star day, you're high vis today, which means some people know personal details about your private life, and tonight you are noticed. For Cancer, it's a 3-star day. Your dealings with a friend or a group are excellent today, and in parentheses, a casual friendship could turn romantic. Tonight, you should learn and explore. For Leo, 4 stars. You make a great impression on bosses, parents, and VIPs today because they see you as attractive, supportive, and even affluent. Tonight, check your finances. For Virgo, 3 stars. This is a great day to make travel plans. It's also the perfect day to pursue opportunities in publishing, medicine, the law, and higher education. Tonight, listening and cooperate. For Libra, 3 stars. You have the financial advantage today, which is why this is a good day to negotiate issues related to wills, inheritances, taxes, debt, and shared property. But tonight, you should work. For Scorpio, 4 stars. This is a great day to schmooze and deal with members of the general public. Everyone loves you. Tonight, you should socialize. Sagittarius, also 4 stars. This is a productive day. Work-related travel is favored. You might see ways to expand whatever you're doing. Tonight, though, you should relax at home. For Capricorn, a 3-star day. Home and family mean a lot to you, and today something confusing is going on, perhaps with a parent. So tonight, enjoy conversations. For Aquarius, 3 stars. You'll enjoy entertaining at home today or making where you live more attractive. Tonight, check your belongings. And finally, for Pisces, you have a 4-star day. You have the advantage today because the moon is in your sign. However, financial matters might be confusing. But tonight, you win.
Now it's time to see what happened on this date in history. On April 13th in 1743, Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd President of the United States, was born in Shadwell in the Virginia colony. In 1861, Fort Sumter in South Carolina fell to the Confederate forces in the very first battle of the Civil War. In 1873, members of the pro-white paramilitary White League attacked black state militia members defending a courthouse in Colfax, Louisiana. 3 white men and as many as 150 black men were killed in what is known as the Colfax Massacre, one of the worst acts of Reconstruction-era violence. In 1943, President Franklin D. Roosevelt dedicated the Jefferson Memorial in Washington on the 200th anniversary of Jefferson's birth. In 1964, Sidney Poitier became the first black performer to win an Academy Award for Best Actor for his performance in Lilies of the Field. In 1997, Tiger Woods, at age 21, became the youngest golfer to win the Masters tournament in Augusta, Georgia, finishing with a record 12 strokes ahead of Tom Kite. And in 1999, Right to Die advocate Dr. Jack Kevorkian was sentenced in Potomac, Michigan to 10 to 25 years in prison for second-degree murder for administering a lethal injection to a patient with ALS, which is also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. Kevorkian ultimately only served 8 years before being paroled.
Well, in news from our political notebook, Cuba's president warns the United States against attacking. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel said the U.S. has no valid reason to carry out a military attack against the island or to attempt to depose him. Speaking in an interview on NBC News' Meet the Press, the president said an invasion of Cuba would be costly and affect regional security. If the time comes, I don't think there would be any justification for the United States to launch a military aggression against Cuba or for the U.S. to undertake a surgical operation or the kidnapping of a president, Diaz-Canel said, speaking through a translator. He added, if that happens, there will be fighting and there will be a struggle and we will defend ourselves, and if we need to die, we'll die. Because as our national anthem says, dying for the homeland is to live. His comments come as tensions between Cuba and the United States remain high, despite both sides acknowledging talks, although no details have been shared. Diaz-Canel has accused the U.S. government of implementing, quote, a hostile policy, unquote, against Cuba, and said it has, again quoting, no moral to demand anything from Cuba, unquote. He noted that Cuba is interested in engaging in dialogue and discussing any topic without conditions, again quoting, not demanding changes from our political system as we are not demanding change from the American system about which we have a number of doubts, close quote. Cuba blames a U.S. energy blockade for its deepening woes, with the lack of petroleum affecting the island's health system, public transportation, and production of goods and services. From the District of Columbia, disaster requests have been okayed for 7 states. The Trump administration approved major disaster declaration requests for at least 7 states this week, according to information released Saturday by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, allowing affected communities to access federal support. Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, South Carolina, South Dakota, and Washington were granted major disaster declarations which can unlock federal support and funding for recovery needs such as public infrastructure and aid for survivors.
You are listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for Monday, April 13th on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. We'll return for some more readings after a short break. Your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Ted Pajacki.
and Ed Howard. And we'll turn now to the local news. And our first story is dosage of fentanyl that killed Quinn questioned. Expert undercuts a claim on how much fentanyl killed Crystal Quinn. A key piece of evidence seems to have fallen apart. The dose of fentanyl that killed a Farrow's witness may not have been enough to kill hundreds of people after all. A new report from a toxicology expert hired by federal prosecutors calls into question earlier claims from prosecutors about how much fentanyl killed Crystal Quinn, 37, the former exotic dancer who had agreed to cooperate in the federal government's case against Farrow's Gentleman Club owner Peter Gerace Jr. Prosecutors still believe she was murdered before she could testify at the strip club owner's 2024 trial, but defense lawyers for two of the men charged with retaliating against Quinn say the new report bolsters their view she died from an accidental overdose and undercuts the government's conspiracy case headed for trial in June. In a letter filed in court last week, a prosecutor revealed the toxicology expert said the high amount of fentanyl detected in Quinn's blood does not necessarily mean the Depew woman had 400 times a lethal dose of the potent opioid, as prosecutors previously said in building their witness retaliation case against Gerace and other defendants. At a court hearing in November 2023, Assistant U.S. Attorney Casey Chalbeck said the fentanyl in Quinn's body would have been enough to kill everybody in the Robert H. Jackson U.S. Courthouse in Buffalo. She had potentially enough fentanyl in her system to kill 400 people, Assistant U.S. Attorney Joseph Trippi said the following month at a detention hearing for John T. Tomio Ehrman. Prosecutors have identified Ehrman, a Lancaster resident now in pretrial custody, as a national leader of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club and part of a reported witness tampering conspiracy to prevent Quinn from testifying. Prosecutors saw the amount of fentanyl in Quinn's body as evidence of an intentional killing. It's their key piece of evidence that seems to have fallen apart, said defense attorney Peter Kushoian, who represents Simon Gogolak, a previously convicted drug dealer that a grand jury indictment accused of intentionally giving Quinn the lethal dose in his Wellsville home. All of this evidence is just consistent with an accidental overdose, Kushoian told the Buffalo News. Ehrman's defense lawyer, George Moscato, told the News that the toxicology expert's analysis of Quinn's cause of death casts doubt on the government's case. I don't think there's any question that drugs were involved in her death, Moscato said. It's how the drugs ended up getting in her system, and this report tends to verify or lend credibility to the fact that this was anything but murder. Moscato said the report, quote, certainly supports the fact that this death could very well have been accidental, close quote. The disclosure of the expert's view of Quinn's blood draw comes about 2 months before a federal trial of 4 people accused of conspiring to kill Quinn to prevent her from testifying in Gerace's trial. In addition to Gerace, they include Gogolak, the man who called 9/11 to report Quinn's death, Ehrman, a Farrow's manager, who prosecutors called Gerace's link to the Outlaws, considered a dangerous and violent criminal organization by law enforcement, and Wellsville resident Howard Hinkle Jr., among the last to be seen with Quinn. All 4 pleaded not guilty and remain jailed ahead of their trial. 2 others will also be tried in the joint trial, accused of making false and evasive statements to law enforcement about Quinn's death. Michael Roncone, who is president of the Rare Breed Motorcycle Club's Wellsville chapter, and Frank Knight, a Wellsville resident who lived across the street from Gogolak.
Our next article is about local retail business. The headline is, with a passport in hand, the world opens for readers in Western New York. Plot twist. Your next passport stamp is at the bookstore. On Saturday, Western New York bookstores kicked off the countdown to the 13th annual Independent Bookstore Day on April 25th, marked by the Buffalo Bookstore Passport Program. The popular promotion lets readers visit participating bookstores from now until April 25th to collect stamps in a printable passport booklet and be entered then to win prizes. In their travels, store owners hope readers will discover bookstores they never even knew existed or rediscover old favorites. It's a way for business owners to build excitement in hopes of luring book lovers away from the ease of Amazon and back to the bookstores in their own communities. Independent Bookstore Day is a national event promoted by the American Booksellers Association and embraced by Buffalo bookstores. This year, 26 local stores are collaborating to offer the passport. For us, Independent Bookstore Day is bigger than Small Business Saturday after Thanksgiving, said Meg Howe, the owner of Alice Ever After Books on Parkside Avenue. It's our biggest shopping day of the year by far. To capitalize, Alice Ever After hosts a slew of special events and promotions, which see hundreds of people participate during the month. There will be story time with the Theater of Youth, a local author festival, balloon sculpting, and zinc making class. There's free swag while supplies last, such as totes that say, "Fight evil, read books," and a golden ticket hidden in the store. Whoever finds it will win 12 free audiobook credits. Each store will have its own Independent Bookstore Day promotions. There will also be pop-up shops. When I first opened the shop, a lot of people thought there were only 2 or 3 bookstores in the city of Buffalo. They didn't know how many bookstores we actually have, Howe said. So I think people are excited to try the ones that they keep hearing about. No purchase is necessary to participate, but online purchases don't count towards the passport. Passports need to be stamped in person. We really want people just getting in stores and seeing what's there, she said. I would say most people try to buy something small, so we try to offer little things like stickers or buttons that are very cheap. Participants can enter the contest with as few as 5 passport stamps and be eligible then to win prizes. But those who get stamps from all 26 stores have the chance to win the biggest prizes. One winner will receive a $50 gift card to every store on the list. That's a $1,300 value. Among those who collect more than 15 stamps, 2 winners will be chosen to receive a $25 gift card to each store, which has a $650 value. Several other winners will be chosen among those with fewer stamps to win things such as swag and stickers. This year, there is a slow and steady passport option that allows participants to stretch their store visits out until September 7th. They can then turn in their passport at any bookstore to be entered into a drawing to win a $25 gift card to each store. We opened our doors at 10 o'clock today, and at 10:06 we had our first stamp, and she already had been to another bookstore, Howe said. So everyone's really getting excited. Independent Bookstore is basically our Super Bowl, she said. It's one of the biggest drivers and biggest sales days of the year for bookstores. This year's giveaways and store promotions at Read It All and Eat include a wheel prize that allows shoppers to spin for discounts and prizes with each and every purchase.
Well, I'll say a good word for Alice Ever After. We bought many books for our grandkids there, and it's a great place right across from the Buffalo Zoo.
Yes.
Our next story, Simonelli is planning for 160 townhomes at its Muir Woods site. A fourth housing project is being proposed for the Muir Woods property north of the University of Buffalo's North Campus, constructing for sale townhomes to take up the other half of the central portion of the site, where a second phase of student housing was supposed to be built but never was. Simonelli Real Estate Corporation, which had owned Muir Woods for most of the last 30 years before selling it in three pieces, plans to build 160 new, attached, single-family townhouses immediately to the right of the new traffic circle and the Aspen Heights student housing community that were constructed north of the Lockport Expressway. Plans submitted by a Simonelli affiliate calls for 30 clusters of 4 and 6 units on 17 acres of vacant land at 770 John James Audubon Parkway, with a set of 4 new private roads to be constructed that would connect them to the traffic circle. The land is adjacent to a lake and other wetlands, with the I-990 just to the south. The project would feature 26 unit clusters and 10 4-unit clusters, each of which would have lots of 1,396 square feet on the ends and either 2 or 4 lots of 1,329 square feet in the middle. Each 3-bedroom townhome would be 2 stories in height, with a garage, front porch, and driveway facing a private road and concrete sidewalk, plus a rear patio and grass lawn in the back. The individual townhomes would be sold. In all, the project would include 320 parking spaces, 2 for each unit. About 14.5 acres of the site would be disturbed by the project, which would still leave 10.5 acres of open space when it's done to be owned and maintained by the Homeowners Association. As part of the project, the existing town bike path will be redone and coordinated into the design, while the property to the north will remain open and natural space for residents. Dubbed the Townhomes at Muir Woods, the proposed venture would presumably finish off the last remaining undeveloped piece of land within the 326-acre Muir Woods property, a vast expanse of land and wetlands that extends almost from Sweet Home to Campbell Roads. It would also address a vacancy created when Aspen Heights Partners of Austin, Texas, opted not to complete its original plan for the site. Aspen in 2021 had purchased 46 acres from Simonelli at the head of Audubon Parkway, with original plans for an $83 million student housing development that could have accommodated up to 1,800 students. The developer had proposed to build a residential complex of cottage and townhouse-style units in 2 phases, with 220 units and 866 beds in the first phase, and another 295 units and 925 beds in the second. That concept was approved by the town in an amended environmental finding statement in 2021 that envisioned multiple development scenarios for the site, but economic conditions changed, so the first phase was scaled back to 197 units, and Aspen never proceeded with the second. That triggered a lawsuit last year by Fifth Third Bank after Aspen borrowed $2 million for the project, then reportedly defaulted on the loan in 2024. Simonelli's plan would finish what is considered Site B of Muir Woods. Simonelli previously sold off the western part of Muir Woods to Ryan Homes for the Preserve Housing Subdivision, with 148 single-family homes, while the western portion went to Severin Development, whose $72 million Sawyer's Landing project was to include another 180 apartments and duplex units and 63 townhouses by Ryan. But the developer first needs the town to amend the finding statement to allow for a townhome project alongside the student housing.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 15 minutes after the hour. And we turn now to the sports section. And here it is. The excitement is growing in Western New York as the Sabres will be playing their last two games of the regular season today and Wednesday. And they're getting ready for the playoffs, which they haven't seen in 14 years. And so the headline across the entire page is Power Switch. And this article says, the Sabres put renewed emphasis on slumping power play in preparation for the playoffs. Practice has been short and sweet the last couple of days for the Buffalo Sabres, clocking in at less than 40 minutes both times. That's pretty normal for this point in the season, but the Sabres spent a good deal of time tinkering with their inconsistent power play. Buffalo is 0 for 17 with a man advantage over the last 5 games heading into tonight's contest with the Chicago Blackhawks in the United Center. Even though power play chances often decrease in the postseason, an extra goal or two on special teams can still make a huge difference in a series. That's the one thing that can separate us and really help us to go deep, said center Tage Thompson. Our penalty kill has been great all year. 5-on-5 play has been great also. Goaltending has been great. We definitely have the guys to do it. We've done it before, just trying to find a little bit of a spark. One key change over the weekend saw Alex Tuch move onto the number 1 unit along with Thompson, Jason Zucker, Jack Quinn, and Rasmus Dahlin. Josh Norris went down to the second group with Zach Benson, Ryan McLeod, Josh Doan, and Bowen Byram. We're going to take a look at this for a game or two. We have that luxury, Coach Lindy Ruff said. Before these last 5 games, our power play was on a pretty good pace. We were 6 for 17 in the previous 6 games. We've run a little bit dry, so now it's time to try something. The Sabres are 18th on the power play this season at 19.9%, but man advantage units are notoriously fickle. Teams with elite players often struggle, and the Pittsburgh Penguins have been an example of that for many years. Entering Sunday, for instance, there are 5 teams that started the day ranked below Buffalo who are also in playoff spots. First of all, President's Trophy winner Colorado is one of them. Their power play is 25th at 17.9%, and the hard-charging Philadelphia Flyers has pushed into 3rd place in the Metropolitan Division despite having the league's worst power play at 15.5%. It's a bit of a different look, so you want to see if that sparks anything, said Quinn, who is now planted on the top unit with Dahlin. You want to put some goals on the board for the group and chip away at it. We've had some looks, but are a little snake bit right now. You want to kind of get an attack mindset, get some shots on, put the PK in a little chaos. The Sabres have a major home road disparity on the man advantage, as they are 7th in the league at the KeyBank Center at 23.8%, but 31st on the road at only 15.7%. They are 4 for 36 on the road since the Olympic break, and just 1 for 19 in the last 7 road games. But they went 4-2-1 in that stretch. Sometimes this takes a little greasy one to go in for you, Thompson said. Power plays can be streaky. We just need to get hot at the right time. You have to use these last 2 games as an opportunity to find something. The biggest thing is not to get frustrated. You'll get chances, and when it's not going in, you get frustrated, and you start looking to do other things, and that just complicates it. With the division title at stake, The Sabres are going full bore into the Chicago game tonight. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen will play in goal, and the forward lines and defensive pairs remain status quo in practice over the weekend. Logan Stanley and Zach Mensah appear to be the number 3 pair on defense. The Sabres have won 5 straight games over the Blackhawks, including a 9-3 rout at the KeyBank Center on November 21st, and they are 8-0-1 in their last meetings. They are 3-0-1 in their last 4 at the United Center. Before this 9-game run, the Sabres were just 1-11-4 against Chicago in a stretch that cut through the Hawks' glory days from October 11, 2010 to November 17, 2019. The Hawks went to the West Final 5 times in 7 years, from 2009 to 15, and won the Stanley Cup in 2010, 13, and 15. But Chicago will miss the playoffs this year for the 6th straight season and for the 8th time in the last 9 years. And finally, for the 4th year in a row, winger Alex Tuch is the Sabres nominee for the King Clancy Memorial Trophy, presented by the National Hockey League annually to the player who best exemplifies leadership qualities on and off the ice and has made a noteworthy humanitarian contribution to his community. The winner will be chosen by a committee of National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman and former winners of the Clancy and National Hockey League Foundation Player Award. The winners also receive a $25,000 donation to a charity of their choice. This past Friday, Tuch and his wife, Kylie, were at Sisters of Charity Hospital to make a $50,000 donation from his AT9 Foundation to the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. Tuch's second son, Teller, spent 2.5 weeks in the unit after he was born in April of 2025.
Well, staying with the Sabres now, we have Mike Harrington's column, and his headline is, Sabres don't know their opponent, but this much is clear, 3 points wraps up the Atlantic title. 3-game Sunday involving Eastern Conference teams didn't do much to offer any definitive answers on the Buffalo Sabres' playoff future. Things are trending for the Sabres to meet the Boston Bruins in round 1, but that's still dependent on them winning their remaining games. The one thing that stays the same is that Buffalo's outlook is a simple one. If the Sabres get 3 points in their final 2 games, they win the Atlantic Division, no matter what the Tampa Bay Lightning and Montreal Canadiens do. That's all that stands between the Sabres and their first division title since 2010. They play Monday at Chicago and host Dallas in the regular season finale on Wednesday in KeyBank Center. Buffalo has 106 points, and Montreal pulled even with the Sabres thanks to Sunday's 4-1 win over the New York Islanders. Tampa Bay has 104 points. There are scenarios where the Sabres could clinch the division title Monday night, but they vary based on if Buffalo wins in regulation or an overtime shootout, and also require a Detroit win at Tampa Bay or a Tampa Bay win in an overtime shootout. With the Detroit-Tampa Bay game starting at 7 p.m., the Sabres not facing off till 8:30, Buffalo will know if the division is in play Monday night before the game is even through 2 periods. If the Sabres get 2 points in the last 2 games, they'll clinch second place in the Atlantic and home ice advantage in the first round of the playoffs. They would be ahead of Montreal on tiebreakers and would still have a chance to hold off Tampa Bay for the division title based on the results of the Lightning's final 2 games. The Sabres have all the tiebreaker advantages over Montreal. Things are uncertain versus Tampa as Buffalo holds the number 1 tiebreaker of regulation wins, but Tampa has the edge in the number 2 tiebreaker of regulation and overtime wins if that's needed.
And in going from pucks to putts, yesterday the Masters tournament had another great finish. The headline is McMasters Champ Goes Back to Back. Rory McIlroy joined the elite company on Sunday at the Masters when he pulled away with a pair of birdies around Amen Corner and, as usual, saved a little drama for the end before taking his place in Augusta national history as only the fourth back-to-back champion. In a final round where three players had a two-shot lead, McIlroy seized control for good with a bold shot over Rays Creek to 7 feet away from the pin for birdie on the par 3 12th. Then he blistered a 350-yard drive on the par 5 13th that set up another birdie to move 3 shots ahead. There were a few dicey moments, including a shot over the par 3 16th green that required him to use the slope to get in close for par, having to get up and down on par for par on the 17th and a wild drive on the 18th that wound up closer to the 10th fairway. He tapped it in for a bogey and a 1 under 71 for a one-shot victory over Scotty Scheffler. A year ago, his playoff victory over Justin Rose made McIlroy only the 6th player with a career Grand Slam. With another green jacket, McIlroy joined Tiger Woods, Nick Faldo, and Jack Nicklaus as the only repeat winners of the Masters. I just can't believe I waited 17 years to get one green jacket, and I get 2 in a row, McIlroy said. I think of all my perseverance at this golf tournament over the years has really started to pay off. It was a tough weekend. I did the bulk of my work on Thursday and Friday, but just so happy to hang in there and to get the job done. McIlroy stood tall when he tapped in the final putt to finish at 12 under 276. There was no relief like last year of going 17 years trying to win the Masters. This was pure joy. And for the first time since 2002, when Woods went back-to-back, it was up to the Augusta National Chairman, Fred Ridley, to help him get into his green jacket. It still fits, which is nice, McIlroy say at the trophy presentation.
Well, during the death notices, we noted the passing of Phil Garner, a 3-time All-Star who won a World Series with the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1979. We'll take a moment now to say a little bit more about his career. He won a World Series championship as a player with the Pittsburgh Pirates and managed the Houston Astros to the Fall Classic in 2005, and he passed away on Saturday at age 76. He passed away peacefully last night, April 11th, surrounded by family and love after a 2+ year battle with pancreatic cancer, said the Garner family in a statement on Sunday. Phil never lost his signature spark of life he was so well known for, or his love for baseball, which was with him until the end. Garner had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in February of 2024. Nicknamed Scrap Iron, Garner wrote a hard-nosed playing style to 3 All-Star Game selections during his 16-season playing career from 1973 to 1988. The infielder batted .260 with 109 home runs and 738 RBIs in 1,860 career games with the then Oakland Athletics, the Pirates, the Astros, the LA Dodgers, and the San Francisco Giants. He was a member of the 1979 We Are Family Pirates championship team. Garner later managed the Milwaukee Brewers, Detroit Tigers, and Astros, posting a .985 to a .1054 record. He took over for Jimmy Williams and guided the Astros to the National League pennant in 2005 before his team was swept by the Chicago White Sox in the World Series. And in one other note from baseball, Toronto has placed George Springer on the 10-day injured list on Sunday with a fractured big toe. The Blue Jays called recalled fellow outfielder Eloy Jimenez from AAA Buffalo. Springer is batting .185 with 2 homers and 6 RBIs through 14 games this season, and if he's coming off an injury, we can be pretty sure we're going to see him on a rehab assignment here in Buffalo at some point in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
We look forward to there. You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and the time is 30 minutes after the hour. And now we turn to the advice column of Asking Eric. The headline is, Dying Friend Refuses Contact from Longtime Close Friends. Dear Eric, 3 of us attended high school together and remained close friends for many decades, even though we sometimes lived quite far from each other. A few years ago, Beth had some medical problems that were aggravated by COVID, and she had to retire unexpectedly from a fulfilling job. She fell into a deep depression and withdrew from us. We kept in touch with her family, who updated us about her ups and downs. They let us know that it wasn't just us. She isolated herself from everyone, even some of her own family. She tried therapy and antidepressants, but nothing seemed to work. We sent gifts, cards of encouragement, emails, texts. Nothing has been acknowledged for at least a couple of years. Our last phone calls were over 4 years ago. Her grown son, Michael, has just let us know that Beth has a terminal illness. She has been wonderful about keeping us informed about her condition, or he has, but it's dissuading us from contacting his mother, who has remained firm in her desire to remain isolated from friends. I might add that Beth's immediate family is very caring and supportive, so she's not lacking in help and comfort. It is heartbreaking to lose this friend of 60 years without saying goodbye, telling her how much she has meant to us, and letting her know that we cherish the years of treasured memories. Now, do we remain silent, or do we reach out? So far, we're just taking cues from Michael. And it's signed 2 men, or 2 left behind. And Eric replies, Dear Left Behind, my heart aches for Beth and for you. That a terrible situation all around. I think you're going to need to express your goodbye one way or another, even if you don't express it directly to Beth per her request. Start with a letter. You're grieving, and those feelings need somewhere to go. Write her a letter telling her what she's meant to you, reflecting on the memories you've shared, and expressing what you're feeling now. You may find that the act of writing alone meets the need that you have. But if you're still wishing for another way to say goodbye, reach out to Michael and ask if he'll simply receive the letter for you. He can honor his mother's wishes by not sharing it with her, but there still could be something healing in simply making this gesture. You might also let Michael know that if he ever wants a fond remembrance of his mother, he's free to read them. This goodbye could help his grief as well as he travels down the road. Our next letter, Dear Eric, I've never written to a columnist before, but feel compelled to put my 2 cents in about this letter from, quote, ignored friend, end quote. The letter writer resented that one of her friend's teenage sons was uncommunicative, seemingly rude, and wore headphones at joint family dinners. I have a son who sounds like the young lad in that column. He was shy and wore headphones a lot, listening to music and books. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's at 35, and psychosis was part of the disease. He talked about doing all he could to cancel out the voices and the noise in his head. As a mother, I knew other people thought he was rude, and I was criticized for allowing what they thought was rude behavior. Quite the opposite. A kinder, more compassionate person you'll never meet. This letter writer has no idea the stress and concern parents feel for a child who may be experiencing a difficult time in their life. If this bothers the letter writer so much, I suggest just staying home. Kindness wins out every single time. And it's signed, Keeping Kind. Eric's reply, Dear Keeping, thank you for this perspective. Your point is such a valuable one. We never really know what someone else is experiencing. And so, conversation, compassion, and curiosity are always more helpful than resentment and judgment. By sharing it, I don't mean to suggest, and I don't think you mean to suggest, a possible medical diagnosis for the person in the letter. As an aside, often responses will come in that do attempt to diagnose a medical condition or remedy based on a brief description of a problem in a letter. Sometimes those responses will come from actual doctors. And almost always, if there's one diagnosis, there's another response with a completely opposite, equally confident diagnosis. It's my policy not to share those opinions. Medical advice should come from a professional who can ask follow-up questions and evaluate directly. Empathy is missing from so many interactions, but I think it's what lies at the heart of the wonderful advice that you're offering in this reply. Empathy can change our perspective, diffuse conflicts, and transform our relationships.
Well, next we have health news, and the story is headlined, Sneeze Fest, Welcome to Allergy Season. Allergy season can be miserable for tens of millions of Americans when trees, grass, and other pollens cause runny noses, itching eyes, and coughing and sneezing. Where you live, what you're allergic to, and your lifestyle can make a big difference when it comes to the severity of your allergies. Experts say that climate change is leading to longer and more intense allergy seasons, but also point out that treatments for seasonal allergies have become more effective in the last decade. Here are some tips from experts to keep allergy symptoms at bay and maybe even enough to allow you to enjoy the outdoors. First of all, be aware of the allergy capitals. This year, the top 5 cities are Boise, Idaho, San Diego, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Provo, Utah, and just down the thruway, Rochester, New York. What to know about pollen? Some of the most common tree pollens that cause allergies include birch, cedar, cottonwood, maple, elm, oak, and walnut, according to the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America. Grasses that cause symptoms include Bermuda, Johnson, rye, and Kentucky bluegrass. You can track pollen levels. Pollen trackers can help you decide when to go outside. The American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology tracks levels through a network of counting stations across the U.S., and the U.S. counts are available at a website, pollen.aaa, that's 4 A's and an I.org. If you're trying to avoid pollen altogether, the best and first step to controlling allergies is to avoid exposure. If you go outside, wearing long sleeves can keep pollen off of your skin to help ward off allergic reactions. And when you get home, change your clothes and shower daily to ensure all the pollen is off of you, including your hair. It's also useful to rinse your eyes and nose with saline to remove any pollen. Over-the-counter nasal sprays are among the most effective treatments for seasonal allergies, but patients often use them incorrectly, irritating parts of the nose. It's suggested that you angle the nozzle outward toward your ears rather than sticking it straight up your nose. Over-the-counter allergy pills like Claritin, Allegra, and Zyrtec are helpful, but may not be as effective as quickly since they are taken by mouth, according to experts.
I just took a little sip of water to lubricate my throat, and we take water for granted, but our next article talks about water lifelines are threatened. The Iranian military warned it would attack desalination plants and other infrastructure in the Persian Gulf region if the U.S. followed through on a threat to target its fuel and energy infrastructure over the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. In the United Arab Emirates, desalinated water accounts for more than 80% of potable water. Bahrain became fully reliant on desalinated water in 2016, with 100% of groundwater reserved for contingency plans, authorities said. Qatar is 100% dependent on desalinated water. Desalination supplies 90% of Kuwait's residential water needs. Oman is 86% reliant on desalination for its needs. In Saudi Arabia, a much larger nation with a greater reserve of natural groundwater, about 50% of the distributed water supply came from desalinated water as of 2023. Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Republic combined produce about a third of the world's desalinated water and are home to many of the planet's largest desalination plants. The 6 countries, which form the Gulf Cooperation Council, have a combined population the United Nations estimated to top 61 million in 2025. Desalination in the Gulf is highly concentrated, with a small number of plants producing the majority of the output. Many are cogeneration plants, meaning they also produce significant electricity for the national grid. The plants sit within a range of missiles and drone strikes, and attacks could trigger humanitarian and economic shocks, according to the Atlantic Council. The consequences could be devastating, disrupting water supplies to public facilities, businesses, houses, and hotels, or cascade into citywide power outages and calls for complete evacuations, the council said. The Saudi capital, Riyadh, would have to evacuate within a week if the Jubail plant, its pipelines, or associated power infrastructure were seriously damaged or destroyed. To mitigate the risk of supply disruption at the capital, the Saudi government commissioned the Riyadh Strategic Water Reservoir, which in 2023 was verified by the Guinness World Records as the world's largest drinking water storage facility. Qatar assessed several years ago that it risked running out of potable water within 3 days if supplies were disrupted. The tiny peninsula nation, where summer temperatures can reach 122 degrees Fahrenheit, in 2018 completed 15 of the world's largest concrete drinking water reservoirs, each with enough capacity to fill about 180 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The project earned Qatar a Guinness World Book of Records for the largest individual tanks and largest network. Saudi Arabia leads the desalination industry in terms of capacity, with the UAE and Israel in second and third place. The largest plant is the $7.2 billion Ras Al Khair, the facility in Saudi Arabia, able to process 3 million cubic meters of water per day, followed by the $1 billion Jubail plant. The UAE hosts 4 major plants. The $500 million Sorek plant in Israel can process 640,000 cubic meters of water per day and contributes 20% to Israel's water demand. Most Saudi and UAE plants don't involve U.S. investors. The Saudi plants were built with the help of Germany's Siemens and France's Engie, while the UAE plants involve Spain's Acadia Energy and Belgium's B6 Group.
Well, next we have a story that summarizes Apple's 50-year odyssey. The company redefined technology and pop culture and comeback stories. A scrawny hippie and a nerdy engineer vowed to change the world when they founded a Silicon Valley startup 50 years ago. The odyssey began in April of 1976 when a then shaggy Stephen Jobs and his gadget-loving friend Steve Wozniak signed a two-page partnership document that created Apple Computer Company. Jobs, a college dropout, and Wozniak, a Hewlett-Packard employee, each received a 45% stake in Apple. 10% went to their advisor, Ron Wayne, age 41. The company got off to such a shaky start while trying to build a personal computer in the Los Altos, California home of Jobs' parents that Wayne relinquished his stake for $2,300. It proved to be a $370 billion mistake based on how much his holdings would have grown now that Apple boasts a value of $3.7 trillion. Jobs eventually took over as CEO and masterminded an innovation factory that turned out the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad. Apple didn't enjoy its first smash success until June of 1977 with the release of the Apple II computer priced at $1,298. With sales booming, Apple went public in late 1980 at $22 a share, which translates into 10 cents per share after adjusting for stock splits. That means that $2,200 spent to purchase 100 shares at the IPO price would be worth more than $5.5 million today. Apple's next big thing came at the annual shareholders meeting on January 24, 1984, when Jobs unveiled the first Macintosh, a machine that introduced computer mouse and a graphical interface to the public. And that came 2 days after Apple released the Macintosh computer, or teased the Macintosh computer, with a 60-second commercial directed by Ridley Scott that evoked George Orwell's 1984 novel during that year's Super Bowl. The ad created such a huge buzz, it's widely credited for turning Super Bowl commercials into an art form and part of the cultural zeitgeist. Despite its breakthrough features, the Macintosh, named after an engineer's favorite kind of apple, cost $2,500, nearly $7,900 today, one of the reasons that it didn't sell well as anticipated. The letdown resulted in layoffs and another cost-cutting by Apple CEO John Sculley, a former PepsiCo executive whom Jobs personally helped recruit to the company in 1983. A year after the Macintosh's release, the once close relationship between Sculley and Jobs disintegrated into a power struggle. Apple's board sided with Sculley, prompting Jobs to resign in September 1985 with a feeling of betrayal that cut so deep he sold all but one share of his Apple stock. After Jobs left, Apple produced popular versions of the Mac with Sculley at the helm. However, Apple's sleekly designed computers couldn't slow the sales momentum of the more lower-priced PCs that ran on Microsoft software and whose brazen tactics of replicating the Mac's graphical interface triggered a 7-year legal battle that ended in 1994 with a Supreme Court decision that shot down Apple's copyright claims. Apple fired Sculley in mid-1993 and replaced him with Michael Spindler, who lasted until early 1996. The company plucked its next CEO from its own board, Gil Amelio, who engineered a turnaround at computer chip maker National Semiconductor. Only one of Amelio's moves paid off, a $428 million deal for an operating system made by Next, a computer company startup that Jobs had launched. Jobs wanted to spend only a few months advising Amelio in 1997 insisting he wanted to focus on his family when he wasn't busy as CEO of Pixar, the computer animation studio he bought from Star Wars director George Lucas in 1986. But in July 1997, Apple fired Emilio, setting the stage for Jobs to orchestrate a stunning turnaround. By August 1997, Jobs made peace with his longtime rival Microsoft founder Bill Gates and worked out a deal that included $150 million cash infusion from the Windows maker. Jobs introduced the first iPod in October 2001. Apple would sell 450 million of the music storage devices, while all but killing the CD format and setting the stage for music streaming. On January 9, 2007, Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and told the crowd that he was about to show them 3 breakthroughs: an iPod with touchscreen controls, a revolutionary cell phone, and an internet communicator. These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device, and we're calling it the iPhone. More than 3 billion synths sold, and iPhones still account for more than half of Apple's $416 billion of annual revenue, nearly 15 years after Jobs had died of cancer.
Our next article is entitled Not So Secret Lives. Until recently, the prevailing image to outsiders of the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints has been male missionaries wearing white shirts, name tags, and evoked by the hit Broadway show, The Book of Mormon. But another unofficial face of the church has emerged. Digitally savvy female influencers, often seen sporting athleisure, a giant soda in hand, and varying degrees of adherence to church teachings. These influencers have found their audiences curious about faith and families. Some explain the tenets of the Mormon Church, but others bring attention to the rules they often break: drinking alcohol, having premarital sex, and one high-profile instance of soft swinging scandal that birthed the Hulu reality series The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. ABC sought to capitalize on that interest by casting Mormon Wives star Taylor Frankie Paul in The Bachelorette, but it had to scuttle that already filmed season after a video of domestic violence surfaced recently. These viral moments and the Mormon Wives Project, a version of the faith that appears more progressive and lenient than church leadership and other LDS influencers might like. The internet really challenged the church's ability to maintain its own narratives about itself, said Nancy Ross, an associate professor at Utah Tech University that studies Mormon feminism. The church has worked to distance itself from Mormon wives, stating that some media portrayals resort to stereotypes or gross misrepresentations that are in poor taste and have real-life consequences for people of faith. But the Mormon Wives cast are not only LDS influencers online. Many are women in their early 20s who are married with young children. They post about young motherhood and experiences like buying a house before they turn 25. Our culture is fascinating to an outsider, and I can understand why it would pull people in, said Lauren Yarrow, an LDS content creator and podcast host. That Mormon timeline is intriguing to the rest of the world. I think most people innately have a desire for a happy marriage and a happy family life, and we tend to create those in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The beliefs and practices of the church members have been the subject of interest and scrutiny because of how they differ from other religions. Some of these include the belief that the church leadership can receive revelations from God, or the practice of wearing garments under clothing that have deep religious significance. Yarrow said Mormons' wives does not feel representative of their experiences in the church or their lives in Utah. The LDS content creators who spoke with the Associated Press emphasized they don't fault the individual cast members, but rather the production of the show and the way it Hollywoodizes their faith. Representatives for Hulu did not respond to a request for comment. Sometimes they will play on things, twist things, use things that are sacred to us members and the church, and they'll put it out there, and it feels like mockery to us. Some use their online platform to respond to the storylines that they believe don't align with church teachings. We want to be missionaries and spread the good word of the gospel, she continued. And so, this is just another way that we can do it.
Well, you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, April 13th. We read from the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ted Pajacki.
And I'm Ed Howard. We thank you for listening, and go Sabres!
Go!
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the New York Times Magazine. Following that at noon is the USA Today. Stay with us. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability